Buenos Dias Gunners Collective. Back at it? You already know. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Here we go. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Like a motherfucking ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Like a motherfucking smack at it. Bye-ya. 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 Orale, as you can tell by that thumbnail right there, the Hoovers. Orale, and the Bulldogs, right? Trip out on this, right? Two groups that defied the odds. Two groups that flipped it with their own way. Two groups that said, fuck it, Josme la pela, say. Two groups that said, vámonos a la verga, and just did their own thing, right? Two groups that are still around thriving, right? Now watch out. Not every group can do this. Not every gang, not every organization, not every gaggle, right? Or can they? One never knows does one. But one thing I do know is these two groups, these two gangs, they went ahead and did that shit, right? They did it. And the cool part about it is they did it about the same time. Maybe not necessarily the same day, same hour, same year, but they did it about the same time. How do I know? Well, I seen it happen in front of my face. It was written all over their face. They don't have to say your word. And they didn't say a word. They just did what they did, right? Now, about the year 1992, I don't know what was going on in the Pinta. I was young. I was a young buck, right? So I was in the California Youth Authority. I was in Fred C. Nellis. And so I was just trying to just do my thing, right? And in Menudo in direct fashion homes, I was getting with everyone's program, doing what I had to do, because at the same time, if I did it, off with my head, right? Motherfuckers would have whacked me. And that's just what it was, man. I was in no man's land. Let's say I was down there where the enemiga was, and Vatos weren't too happy about it. You had one group trying to get rid of me, another group trying to hold me back. So either way, I was in the struggle, right? And the struggle was real. And I'm going to be totally honest with you. There wasn't a lot of Norteños at that time, homes, that were willing to struggle like a few of us were. We were going through it. You know, we were going through it, homes, but we were battling and we were in war, homes. And Guerra was real, and there was no fucking way, period, homes. We weren't going to plant our flag. We weren't going to hold it down. We were going to get punked. So let's get fuck that. We were young. We were dumb. We were rambunctious. And so let's get weird, a little funky. And we didn't give a fuck. Right now, at the same time, I was functioning right there on the yardas with a whole bunch of Fresno Bulldogs, as well as a whole bunch of Hoovers. And when I say Hoovers, I mean Hoovers from South Central Los Angeles, the Hoovers. 7-4. There was fucking A-Tray Hoover. There was 5 Deuce. There was whatever you could think of, right? The Hoovers were real. Okay, I ran into a lot of real righteous Hoovers. H-Bone from Hoover. S-Rock from Hoover. The list could go on and on and on. Snoop from A-Tray Hoover. And these were just some real righteous individuals. Now, I always noticed, okay, just like the Bulldogs, the Hoovers, even though they were crippin', they were Hoover grooving, they always were an entity of their own. You know, they always made sure that everybody knew they had their own thing going on. You would go out onto the yard, you would see the Crips, and there'd be Crips everywhere, from Shotgun Crip, from Watts. You know, you had Crips from the Avalons, you know, shout out, respects. You had Crips from all the O's, neighborhoods, you know, Harlem's, people was rich rolling around that motherfucking camp. You had people from San Diego. Crips was deep, right? They were way deeper than the Sangres. The Bloods was over here doing their thing. Everybody, all the brothers at that time, were kind of lightweight, getting along, unless you had some hood beef, then you can handle that shit behind the handball court, indubitably, right? But for the most part, so Hoovers always had their own little thing going on. They were crippin', no doubt about it. Then one day they weren't. One day they went from HCG, Hoover Crip Gang, to Hoover Criminal Gang. And when it happened, I didn't notice. I didn't know shit. It wasn't none of my business, right? But they made it everybody's business by announcing, hey, this is what it is, homes. We're now criminals, and fuck it, anybody can get it, right? They went against the grain. I wouldn't necessarily say the word defect. I hate the word defect because it sounds negative. Because they didn't defect, homes. They just said, fuck you. You know what I mean? Straight up. You can get it too. Anyways, they started doing the criminal thing. They were now Hoover Criminal Gang. And I didn't see no difference other than they just weren't no longer representing the blue rag. They just were no longer crippin'. And I didn't know what led up to that. I know that at that time, they were definitely going at it with a lot of the O's, a lot of the neighborhoods, you know, A-Tray Gangster Crips. Just there was a lot of different Crip gangs that they were going at it with. So I think that they felt that if for no other reason, hey, why should they still participating in the Crip? Cripping was hard. Someone had to do it, right? But why should they participate in that? if they were looked at differently anyways. The Hoovers were always looked at differently. It didn't matter where they went, they were the enemy or they had enemies. You know, they were a pretty big group. They were the largest, besides the East Coast Crips who were there too, pretty deep, and all the O's, they were looked at, and they were one of the deepest Crip gangs at that time. So they started doing the criminal thing. Well, around the same time that they were doing that, maybe slightly before they went sideways and did their thing, you know, and ain't nothing wrong with it. That's just what it was. The Fresno Bulldogs decided that for no other reason, they should do the same damn thing. Okay, and I've told that story before. Now, in prison, in the California Department of Corrections, it was already happening since the late 80s, the Red Wave. The Bulldogs were breaking away from you know, the organization. They were starting to form their own and do their thing. The F-14ers were like, fuck it, if for no other reason, Holmes, we're going to do our own thing. They felt oppressed or whatever the case may be. And so they went their own way. They went solo bolo like a sideways in the cholo that didn't drink V8. Vámonos, right? And of course, it trickled down and leaked into the streets as well as the California Youth Authority. The day it happened, I'll never forget. It was cold that day. The wind was blowing. Crickets were chirping. Sureños were in their corner. At the same time, the Hoover criminal gang was doing their thing. Sangres were over here. White guys, sprinkle them in. There was one. And of course, you had a couple Asians. I'll never forget when K9 de Fresno and a couple other Bulldogs walked up to us with the wheel and said, here, read that. Let me read this shit. Can I read it? Right, I'm barely reading shit. At this point in time, the Bulldogs have decided that if for no other reason, they're going to go their own way. I said, what way are you going to go? Because we were all cool. See, I didn't understand. They were norteños. The day before, we had a bomb-ass spray. I said, yeah, that sopa. I never tasted a sopa so good. And now the next day, they were saying, Chale, Holmes, we're no longer norteños. Huelga, we're gone. And I was like, what? Right? And it was that from that point on, you know, that we knew the Bulldogs would never be the same, at least not with us. And, you know, there was a lot that went on. There was homeboys that defected at that time, homeboys that were able to, you know, that decided, not fuck that, Holmes, I'm shit. I'm going the Bulldog route. There was some homeboys that were just like, fuck these vatos, let's get off right now. There were some homeboys that were hurt. I don't know what to do, right? And there were some homeboys that were like, fuck it, Holmes. You know what I mean? And the beat goes on. And the beat goes on. I shall finish the game, right? I was one of them. The beat went on. You know, deep down inside, you know, I was pretty hurt because a lot of these vatos were good-ass homeboys. And I fucked with them tough, Holmes. But at the same time, man, if you don't want to fuck with me, Holmes, and be what I am, Wasowski, then don't. You know what I mean? That's how I felt. I was a gangbanger. You know, I was in the mix. I was dedicated truly to my cause, and I had already spilled sangre and had my sangre spilled. There was no way I was going to just go backwards. You know what I mean? Do I look like a crawdad, Holmes? You know? So I just kept going forwards and doing my thing. But I noticed on the other side of the yarda, the gripas were going through the same thing. Okay? The Hoovers were basically telling them too, so let's get away in Crips no more. They were like, what about that spread we just had? Fuck that spread. That's it. You know what I mean? And I always thought it odd that both these two big groups decided to do this around the same time. What I think is they both had the idea. It was both going. I know with the Bulldogs, they had no choice in why. They just, they functioned according to whatever wheelad they got, man. If someone in the pen said, hey, so let's get tomorrow where sangres, them motherfuckers would have been in that motherfucker like, oh, pow! So, woo! They would have did whatever they had to do. And that's understandable, Hums. When the big homies say jump, you don't ask how high. You just jump and hopefully you don't hit your head on a fucking helicopter. And that's what it is, right? Menudo style and a dog. Right fashion, right? I was scared. You think I'll hit that fucker? I don't know. Jump in with I am, right? No more head. You want to settle the score? Big 4 at your door. No head, no more, right? And that's what that was. I think the Hoovers decided that for no other reason. And I know they had a lot going on in the background. And I can't tell you the reasoning behind why exactly they decided to step away from the crippin'. You know what I mean? They didn't step away from the gangbanging. They still kept being criminals. They still, you know, they dropped the blue rag and picked up the orange rag, and it was on and cracking, you know? But I think they seen that it was what was going on. They were like, fuck it, right now's the perfect opportunity to announce our shit too, and see what happens. Now, what happened was guerra, war, right? War like you've never experienced. You think you watch TV, so, all right, I'm going to put on the news. Let's get down. They're bombs over Baghdad. Yeah, well, we was in Iraq, Holmes. You know what I mean? We was doing our thing too. The Norteños and the Bulldogs and the Southsiders and everybody was at guerra. You have to understand, North and South was always at guerra. You know what I mean? Maybe sometimes we'd calm down and go behind the handball court and handle our business in the blinas, but for the most part, homes, it was open season. Let that be the reason, you know, for the sickness. We'd go to the school area, it'd be on and cracking. We'd go into the different compa, it was on and cracking. If you seen about the you didn't like, or maybe he just didn't like you, it was on and bracking, right? It just was what it was. Now, the same thing happened with the Cripas, right? Once the Hoovers stepped away, there was a lot of Crips that felt some type of way. They felt like the Vatos were turning their back on them. Vatos were stepping away for one reason or another. So they wanted to voice their opinion. Well, fuck them brothers anyways, cuz, right? And next thing you know, Hoovers was like, oh, is that a fact? Yeah, that's a fact. I said, is that a fact? I said it was a fact. Spell it. I can't. They spelled it for him, right? And that was that. They were going at it. Guerra. I started to notice a lot more Crip versus Crip. Where before, if you had a Vato from the 60s and a Vato from Hoover, they got into the same compa. They didn't usually rush each other on site. They would go behind the handball court, handle their business like grown men, even though they were young kids, or they'd go into hey, palabra. I see Vatos go in the closet, grab each other's heads, and just bomb on each other. It was that serious. The short walls right there, Vatos getting on their knees and fighting on their knees. Anything you could do to get off where you were mad at, right? I've seen a lot of different shit. Anyways, these Vatos started to fucking fight in the open, you know, school area, Crip on Crip, or at least I thought it was at that point, but it was usually criminal on Crip, right? Or Crip on criminal. And it just started to pop off. Whereas we were going at it a little bit more with the Bulldogs. We had to kind of watch our backs. And Nellis, it was a little different. There was a couple scuffles with North and Bulldogs, but like I said, man, they got the Bulldogs, the Placas, the administration, and they started locking the Bulldogs up in Taft, which was a lockup unit, and keeping them there. Not because they were piecing up or they wanted to stay there. The administration knew there was going to be problems, right? It was going to be trouble. So they put them over there, and they left us on the linea to fucking struggle another day. Now we didn't have no fucking Pedro Chatos as homeboys. Now it was all bad. Right now it was just a few straggling ass Norteños homes and hella Southsiders. So let's but we held our own. Oh yes, we held our own. Some of us. Some Vatos were like, you want my shoes? I was like, yeah, I'll take those motherfuckers. I'm going to need them because I was getting mine got sangre all over them. And that was just that. And at the same time, the criminals were doing their criminal shit, right? But as I reflect back in hindsight, retrospect, as an older man, and I think about it, and I see a lot of the youngsters nowadays, you know, they're orange rags, homes, criminal gang, Hoover, right? I'm like, that's right. It trips me out to still see these gangs thriving and still around. Because, man, there was one point in time where they had a lot of enemigas, man. They had a lot going on. And you didn't think that they were going to still be around 30-something years later. Same thing with the Pedro Chatos, the Bulldogs. I thought for surely, though, for show, right? On gang. I thought for sure they weren't, that entity, that gang would not last or thrive even. Because, I mean, when you're taking on the world, homes, when you're against the grain and everybody's going at it with you, I mean, obviously, bro, you're in trouble. There's going to be troubles, right? You know, and that's what it was. You know, when I was in Preston, getting that chestone on, you know what I mean? Say it with your chest. Man, the Bulldogs had it bad. I'm going to be honest with you, man. Everywhere they went, every little step they took, like Bobby Brown minus the Coca, Vatos was on their helmet piece, right? People was on their head. But they were fighting back, bro, and I can't deny that. You know, I'd be a poop butt and a liar, a fat mouth, if I said the Bulldogs didn't hold it down. So I seen that, like, okay, maybe the Vatos got what it takes, right? But at the same time, them being my enemiga homes, I wished bad upon them, right? Now, when it comes to the Hoovers, I had no horse in that race, but I always knew the Hoovers to be a very dangerous group and to be a deep group. So every time I looked, man, the Hoovers were on the offensive, not the defensive. You know what I mean? They was like on some hut shit. You know what I mean? They was going out for the bomb, and they were handling their business. Now, as far as what happened on the streets, I'm going to tell you what happened on the streets. We all know the Bulldogs took it to the streets, and you know, it was anybody killer. It was fucking... You know, whoever wanted to get it can get it. And Fresno is what it is, right? You know, they go against North, South. To this day, they have their dominant groups that they beef with. Not only fucking the big groups like the North and the South and whatever, but they also have their internal groups within their city. You know, they were going at it with the TRGs. For a minute, different Crips and Bloods and just different groups. And that's hood beef. That's street beef. That is what it is. You know, I can't sit there and I'm not from Fresno. I don't know what the fuck was going on. All I know about Fresno is I used to mob in that motherfucker, go to Ole Frijole, get me a burrito, and be on out that motherfucker, right? Now, when it comes to LA, homes, South Central LA, Hoover is a very, very large group with a lot of subsets. Like I said, 8 Tray Hoovers, 5 Deuces. You have the, you know, I think it's the 107s. I'm not sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. 7 Deuces, 9 Foes, all that. There was different vatos from different cliques, but in jail, you know, in YA at least, in prison, they came together as Hoover, period. Hoover criminals. Now, I don't know exactly how the functions were on the streets if different cliques did different things. To my recollection, to what I've heard, the Five Deuces actually are the only ones that still stood crippin', correct me if I'm wrong, and still stood true to that, whereas everyone else stepped away from that and just continued to do their own thing. It's history. See, it's history in gangbanging. A lot of people don't know their historia. A lot of people weren't around when that shit happened. They only know criminal. They don't know Hoover Groovers. They don't know Hoover Crips. They don't know, then, you know, they just know the criminal side of it. And that's cool, Holmes. That's cool. Times move on. People are different. Doesn't mean anyone's harder than anyone else. It's just they don't know that history. And a lot of the OGs or people that are my age aren't around to teach them, you know, and a lot of them don't give a fuck. So, what is that right there? Hey, that's a history book. You should read that. No, what's that? That's a Mac 10. I'll take that one, bitch, right? Criminal, right? And that's it. They pick up the gun before they pick up the book, right? Educate oneself, home, so you know how to use that thing. Allegedly. I'm just saying. When it comes to the Bulldogs, same story, different fucking book, right? A lot of vatos aren't educated. A lot of vatos don't strive for education. Now, if you're going to gangbang, homes, if you're going to be in the mix, you need to strive to educate yourself so you know exactly why you're doing what you're doing and how. Who's the founding fathers? Why the fuck you're doing it? So, hey, fuck these other vatos. That's it. Why do we not get along with them? You didn't read the fucking manual? Nah, because I just skipped it. I thought I didn't have time. You know, I was getting a mean out of my mind. You know what I mean? Well, today you have time because we're Chris now, right? You know what I mean? They just vatos don't know. Read up on your history. Learn what's going on because there's a lot going on around you. And a lot of the history is very relevant today. And some isn't. Some is like, fuck, man, they were doing that shit. Vatos wearing big old size 50 pants. I can't do that shit. You know what I mean? TikTok. And that's just what it is. Now, I happen to be privileged to live in that historia, to see both groups right before my eyes peel away and do their own thing. At that time, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I thought it was some crazy shit. Like, damn, how can you just turn your back on your camaradas, on your homeboys, on your friends, on your partners, man? How can you turn your back on the people who you rocked with? But now looking back, as an older gentleman, I see it for what it is. Sometimes, when you feel that your group is getting oppressed, you feel you're getting picked on, or even you guys are deeper than a little bit of other people, and you decide, hey, we can do this without them. We don't need the dead weight, or we don't need these vatos. Fuck these other vatos. Chucky, get up, right? Spider, get down, right? We don't need them. So we can handle our own bizwax, right? Groups decide to go their own way. Now, most groups fail miserably, right? Because you can't take on these juggernauts, these monsters, these bestias. That means beasts, right? You can't take on the Wolverine and the X-Clan, or what is it, the X-Clan or the X-Men? Either way, fucking X, right? IV, they were banging. You can't take on certain groups and think that you're going to win, because you're not. You're going to lose. How these groups were able to do this, how the Hoover criminals were able to go against the Crippen, and how the Bulldogs were able to go against the Nortehoms is beyond my belief. But they did, and that's history. You know, there's a lot of bloodshed and a lot of respect that's not given to these two groups. And I give it to them the utmost. You know, I had some vato get at me the other day. Hey, Gunner, you're the shot caller for the Bulldogs. You have to be, Holmes. You always talk about them. No, I give them respect, bro. See, you didn't live where I lived, Holmes. You weren't there struggling and striving side by side or against, Holmes. You ain't never even fucking seen a Bulldog in real life. Arr, arr. So you don't know, bro. So before you go jumping to fucking conclusions and thinking you know what you know, Holmes, you don't. Spence, Holmes, just because I respect someone, just like I respect the Southsiders, Holmes. Hey, I respect vatos that fucking I consider enemigas, Holmes, because I know what time it is, that's it. You know what I mean? There's scars all over my body, Holmes, due to the guerra that I was involved in, you know? Respects, that's it. When it comes to the fucking Hoover criminals, I respect them, Holmes, because I gotta respect any fucking group, Holmes, that took on and challenged everyone and say, you know what? We're not doing that no more. We're gonna not conform to what you want us to. We're gonna do our own shit. Criminal! Right? And they were handling their motherfucking business. Shout out to the Hoovers, man, for doing that, you know? Shout out to all the other Crips, man, for not letting them do it too easily. You know, and that's just what it was. Anyways, two groups, Bulldogs, Hoovers, stepped away and formed their own thing. And guess what? They thrived doing it. It's not every day two groups defect, Holmes, or go their own way, man, and do their thing. But in the words of the Hoovers, they was getting their groove on. In the words of the Perros, they learned how to walk that dog by themselves. And that's just what it is. With that being said, I hope that you move smooth with a purpose. I hope that you get everything that you want coming to you. Remember, at the end of the day, man, it's all about struggling and striving for your familia and doing it for what you believe in, right? So if you say tomorrow, you know what, I don't want to do that no more. I'm going to do my own thing. Well, do it. We'll see how it works out for you. In 32 years, if you're still doing it, just get respects. If not, told you so, right? And that's that. If you like this, please hit that like and subscribe with a thumbs up. If not, thumbs down. Heavy is the head that's going to wear Gun's crown. I'm going to continue to struggle and strive on for what I truly believe in, and that's the unity of all people. I don't give a fuck what you claim, where you're from. Homes, if you're a righteous individual and you ain't got weird charges and shit like that, come together for power. The gun. Bang, bang. They be hating on me, but I don't care.